welcome, Trish. Trish is gonna
Thank you, Mandy
be
Jo.
Trish is gonna be one of our 55 authors at the Festival of Books and Creativity at the end of June, and that's gonna take place at 12 Mile Crossing in Novi, Michigan.
Yep, very excited.
There's going to be so much going on that day, so many authors, and it's going to be so much fun getting to know everybody. Um, Tell us about your book that you're going to be bringing.
Happy to. I love talking about my book.
Awesome.
Until I come back for you,
Hmm.
um, it is based on a true story, as it says right there, based on a true story from my childhood. So it is set in 1970s rural Michigan, where I grew up. Um, it's a very simple, almost sweet story that I blow up into a much different story. Um, the true story is my sister and I'm the youngest of five, and my sister and I were horse girls. And we stole some horse tack from a neighbor because he had
Uh
really
oh.
nice, yeah, he had really nice stuff and we didn't. So, um, and I was the youngest again, so I had sticky fingers. I loved to steal, I loved to sneak, and that's all wound into the story. But it also is, true and part of the true story. So we stole some stuff from the neighbor. Fast forward, we want to return the stuff and pretend like it was always there, which was one of my tricks as the youngest child. If you get caught stealing, if you can return the stuff and kind of hide it and tuck it away, and that way you can say, see, it was there the whole time. You just didn't see it. That works, believe me. Um, so we
Love
were
it.
gonna we were gonna try that trick. Can we get it back? And then, before we get in trouble or when we get in trouble, we'll just say, look, it was there the whole time. So two little girls. I was 7, and my sister would have been 11. Um, we left the house in the middle of the night to do this. We climbed down. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. We climbed down the TV antenna pole, which I know kids these days won't. What's a TV antenna? You don't need to know,
Really,
right?
really nice pole that made it easy to climb down. Almost like putting up a ladder.
Yep. So we climbed down that. It was right outside our bedroom window, but it was also right outside our parents' bedroom window. So we had to be very, very, very quiet. Um, so we get down, we get the stuff. Two little girls walk all the way to the neighbors, and the neighbors in the country are way farther away than they are. So when I say we went to the neighbors, it wasn't next door; it was a mile plus. Um, we think we're going to just sneak in the barn and put it in, put the stuff in there,
Hmm.
hide it. As we're trying to do that, the dogs start barking.
Of
The neighbor
course.
had two Doberman pinchers. Yeah, and they
Mm.
were trained. So anyway, they start barking. We freak out. We hide. The guy comes out with a shotgun in his hand. Who's out there? We're, we're terrified. So what we ended up doing was we just dropped the stuff in the ditch and ran our little butts all the way home, terrified. And so sometime it was probably 15 years ago. No, probably more than that, maybe 20 years ago. I realized that I love telling that story at parties and stuff because I spent most of my adult life in Washington D.C. So I was around a lot of city slickers, a lot of people who grew up in a much more, I don't know, civilized way than country kids did. And I would tell this story and people would just be flabbergasted, like, what, little girls did that? And I just thought, wow, the reason this story is so much fun to tell is not so much what happened, but what could have happened. That's why
Yeah.
people go, oh. So I
Yeah.
thought, well, why don't I tell that story? I'll tell the real part, but
Mm.
then just let it rip. So
Hmm.
that's where Until I Come Back for You really heads. So It's a little bit of a genre bender because
Mhm.
it's not so much a thriller. I thought it was until I realized that most thrillers, at least right now, what's popular is you need a serial killer, you need an alcoholic detective, right? They're always
Oh,
drunk.
nice.
You know what I mean? They're always drunk. They always have some shady past.
Mhm.
There's always missing girls. There's always something from their childhood or something. Lots and lots and lots of tropes that fall into a thriller. And my
Mhm.
poor little book doesn't have any of those. It's told from my perspective, not as a little girl, but as an adult telling the story.
Mm.
But I don't have. I come to readers. I'm like, sorry, I don't have a serial killer. I do have a bad guy. I have a bad guy.
That's a
Um,
good thing. You gotta have the bad guy. I mean,
yeah.
to me, that's more important than being a serial killer.
Oh, oh yeah. And I make you hate him. You're gonna hate my bad guy so much. I've had people text me when they're in the middle of it, and they're like, "Ooh, I hate this guy. Ooh, I hope he gets
That's good.
it." Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. So that's the basis of it, and then there's just a ton more to it.
Mhm.
I was able to, because the story itself, if I just told the story, it would take this long, right? You see how I can
Mhm.
go right through the story pretty quickly.
Yep.
But what I was able to do was couch that in my family's history, um, coming into the United States, which,
Mm.
both my parents' family, pretty recent immigrants to the United States. Um, and then kind of couch that in my family's history in Michigan, how we moved from the Detroit area to the country, which in and of itself is a book. Like that, City Slickers coming to the country is just a riot, right?
Yep.
And then Hillsdale County and its history in Michigan, and that even though if you don't know anything about Hillsdale, and this has to be true of every small town, you think there's nothing to know there, but the history there is so rich.
Yes.
It's so rich in so many ways. So I look at the Native American tribe
Mhm.
that was there, the Potawatomi, a little bit. Like there's not a ton, but just how, as a kid, when you're kind of seeing how those things come out,
Mhm.
like, wow, Indians used to live right here where we live now. And then also some of the scandalous, like the rootin' tootin' bad guys that were
Mhm.
in that area of the Midwest and literally in my county. So while you're hearing this story about my teeny little life, I kind of let you know how it fits into the history
Mm.
of the county, the state, and a little bit of the US.
Hmm. Now you've got me intrigued.
You gotta read it. Gotta read it.
Okay, this is another one for the to be read pile.
Yep. Put it on your TBR.
Awesome. So you did a lot of research then to get all of this?
I I did more than I needed to, but that's
Okay.
because I love doing research. Um, so I found. Let me show you this great book. Get it right in. Whoop.
Ooh, faded
Dan,
memories.
Dan Bisher. He did
Okay.
the whole history of Hillsdale County. So I mean,
Oh,
it's really great. And this guy on the cover, that's Chief Bobby's. So
okay.
you see, when I say Hillsdale has a lot of history, I mean, there's Lake Bobby's, and there's just a lot there. And this guy has a really rich history. And thank God this guy did all of the homework for me. So it was, I
It
give
is
him a ton
it is so wonderful when people do the research for you so you
of
can just pick
yes.
up the book and go, "Okay, what part do I need for the book?"
Yes. And so I didn't scrimp. I actually did read it all, and you can see all my stickies and everything. But I found, enough in there. But the thing that I'm ashamed that I spent so much time researching, because I didn't need to, but it was so interesting once I did, I needed to know how a body decomposes. And I won't tell you why, but I needed to
Hmm.
know more than just, you know, oh, the person's dead. I wanted to know when do they start to bloat? What
Okay.
color
Yep.
are they? I wanted it to be realistic because I think the audience now, because of all the TV shows, CSI, and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff, the audience today knows a lot more than
Mhm.
they might have, when Dickens or somebody, he
Yep.
could get away with, it was just dead. But, we know now. So I felt like if I write this scene and this isn't somewhat accurate, it's going to distract the reader because they're going
Yep.
to be thinking, no, I saw that on CSI and it wouldn't look like that. So I had that little nag
Yep.
sitting on my shoulder going, you better get this right. You better get this right. Um, but again, like I said, once I started researching it, it was a lot of fun. But then I started thinking, if it's true that the government watches what you do and what your searches are, they're going to be a little concerned about me because
Until they find out that you're an author and you actually put it
exactly,
into a book. I mean,
exactly. I was
there's
like,
certain things that authors can get away with because, hey, we wrote a book on it.
yes, so I could say, it's in here, it's in here. Actually, it's in here.
I utilized that research for a good cause.
Yes, yes. And you don't have to worry. I don't get as gory as actual details are. I mean, but I just wanted it to be realistic. You know what I mean? Because I was thinking, if I was reading it and somebody was way off on the stages of decomposition,
Mhm.
it would distract me, and I would think, why are they putting that there? It wouldn't be
Yeah.
like that because I do watch way too much crime TV. So,
Yeah. I'm with you there.
but the rest of it was pretty easy because it's literally other true stories from my childhood. I had a very interesting mother. She's very wicked smart and very complicated, but incredibly brave. So, on a lot of levels, it's a story about my mom and me and sisters and all of that, and again, how we kind of Russian doll fit into each other. Um, but those childhood stories were just here.
Mhm.
So I didn't have to do any research. However, I would occasionally text my siblings and say, do you guys remember blah 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 blah, and they might steer me in the right direction and say, no, actually it happened this way.
Okay.
And if my version was more interesting than the truth, I went with my version. you know
Well, of course you
that's
did. It's fiction.
right, right.
And nobody and that's the great thing about fiction, you know, nobody's gonna question you on whether or not how true it is. It's fiction.
You would be wrong because I
Really?
put yeah, well, because it is based on a true story, and
Ah.
there are some very unbelievable true stories in there. Another thing I get when somebody's reading it, if it's somebody that I know, they'll text me and say, "Is this true? Did this really happen?" Or I had one friend say, "If even a tenth of this is true, I want to give you a hug." And I'm like, way more than a tenth of it is true. There are
That's
there are a lot,
awesome.
yeah, there are a lot of very um, just almost bracing stories about, again, like my mom, because she was
Mhm.
incredibly brave. Um, her courage and her intelligence led her to do things that she was completely unqualified for. And
Oh.
again, just like my little story is interesting not because of what happened, but because of what could have happened. When I
Mhm.
tell stories about my mom, it's what really happened. It's
Okay.
not just interesting because of what could have happened. It really did happen, and she left us with a lot of great stories to entertain people. I can hold court at a party anytime and just whip off stories about my mom, and people are like, "Oh, all true." Yeah, she was incredible.
So you mentioned that your family is fairly recently immigrated to the US. Where did they come from?
The most interesting one, my, all right, let me think. My mom's grandma. So my great grandma,
Mhm.
she was in Alsace-Lorraine, which I had never heard of, but it was an occupied part of France where
Mm.
Germany was occupying France, that section of it. So the
Mhm.
French
Mhm.
people who were kind of stuck there, and this would have been World War One.
Okay.
The people who were stuck there, they were kind of in occupied France. But so my great grandmother spoke fluent German.
Mm.
And so we just kind of thought, before Ancestry and before 23andMe, we just always thought that we had to be part German because she spoke German. And then we thought, well, maybe we're part French because she was in occupied France. So I get my stuff back. I'm not French or German. She had left, her family had left the UK,
Okay.
and we're in that part of France. I don't know, maybe running from something else, and then they get stuck in occupied.
Oh,
Um,
jeez.
and so, see what I mean? Like this, it's interesting.
Mhm.
Anyway, so my great grandmother then, we called her Mimi. She's stuck in Alsace-Lorraine. She's married and she gets pregnant, and they're like, we're getting out of here. So she left first and her husband was going to come after. So she came to the US and she would have been in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Um, Now, her husband, who stayed behind, he was a lumberjack.
Mm.
He was killed one day. Tree came, hit him, boom, right in the head. So she got here. My grandmother was literally, the bun in the oven during the trip. And the family lore has it that my grandma was born with a pink scar right where her dad would have been hit by the tree. I
Mm.
love that story. I think that's
Yep.
so cool. It's tragic, obviously that her dad never made it out, but
Mhm.
it's cool. And again, like it comes, all of these stories of the strength of the women in my family, like that my Mimi, was escaping war torn Europe
Mhm.
with my grandmother. My grandmother conceived there, born here. Um, so that's like, that's a really interesting history of my family. And I don't know as much about my dad's family, but I know that he would be only like maybe the second generation born in the US. And his
Mhm.
family, when they got here, went south. So he was in Louisiana. And then the story of the migration from the
Mhm.
south to Detroit to work in the factories.
Yep.
He was part of that. So, yep, lots of really, just minor history
Mhm.
of my family in the US, but it's the same story as so many people,
Yeah.
like you were nodding your head, there was a
Mhm.
huge wave of
Yep.
poor people from the South who, they just put ads in the paper or whatever and said, if you want to work, come on. So all of these people who are totally used to the South, they,
Mhm.
what they ate, how they talked, everything, they just whoosh, made their way up to Michigan and Detroit, and that was
Mhm.
just boomtown for them,
Yeah.
So yeah. So my dad brought like that southern sort of heritage with the
Mhm.
sweet tea and the a
Mhm.
few different things. He didn't have the accent. My mom would never have stood for the accent, but he did teach us how to drink very, very, very sweet tea. So yeah,
Spoon included.
yeah.
Awesome. So you've got this one book. Are we going to see more books coming from you? Because you said you've got all these stories. You could do like an anthology just yourself with all your family folklore.
I really could. I'm gonna wait and like let this one marinate.
Okay.
'Cause I really hadn't thought of it. This
Mm-hmm.
is the story that was stuck in my head and I had to get it out. Um, Now that it's out, I say somewhere in there, like, now that I'm done with this book with the characters, please get out of my head now because you have lived rent free for a long time in my head.
But do they?
Um,
Do they actually leave?
oh, I don't know. I don't know. So, I'm just gonna kind of let this one marinate, and
Mhm.
if people are interested in it more, I have thought to maybe instead of going forward, maybe come back and tell
Oh.
my mom's story, tell my
Mhm.
grandma's story, tell my Mimi's story.
Mhm.
But it's gonna have to be a lot more fiction than this one
Yeah.
because I don't know as many stories about my mom growing up, and she's gone now. I don't know as many stories about my grandmother, and she's gone now. So
Mhm.
it's possible, but I'm still in that phase of like nobody's gonna want to read this. Is this really that interesting? Just because I had to get it out of my head,
Right.
So I kind of have that is it
Mhm.
imposter complex.
Yep.
So
Every author goes through it, even when they're writing their 12th or 20th or whatever that number of book is. Every
yeah,
author goes through it going, "Do they really wanna read this?" You
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And I think that happens with no matter how far you get into a series, you get the, "Gee, are they still interested in these characters?
yeah,
Or will they like this series? They liked the other one, will they like this one?" And, yeah,
yeah,
I totally get it.
yeah.
Mhm,
I was saying that it's a little bit of a genre bender, and I can't
mhm,
really put it in place. I feel like if you're writing fantasy, definitely have
mhm.
to do a series because you don't build that world for just one story. Is my guess. It's like once
Yeah,
we've built the world, we're going to do a lot in that world, and your readers are now in the world. They've become comfortable there, and they want to stay there. Um, but with this one, with this genre, it's it doesn't really lend itself as much to a series,
mhm.
um, except that idea of is my mom's life really interesting? Can I tell that? And then my grandma's and my great grandma's. I'm just so thrilled to have this out. It's only been out
Mhm.
for less than a month now,
That's
so
awesome.
uh, you know, and getting through the publishing process is like the editing and then line editing and
Mhm.
proofreading and getting the cover just right and all that kind of stuff. Um, I didn't have kids, but I have a feeling that there's something similar to giving birth to a book. Like, you know, all these other people who are somehow involved, and at
Yep,
some point, you've got to just push and
yep.
yell at everybody around you,
Mhm.
like, we're getting this done now. So
Yes, that is true. It and there is the thing with trying to get that book out there and, you know, when is yes, you definitely need to edit, but there's also a thing of don't edit it to death, get it out.
yes, yes. And in that way, I'm also guessing it's a little bit like being a mother because if I look through this right now, just like if I had a kid, I would, oh, you can do a little bit better there. You can do a little bit better there. Like, why didn't you expand on this and all? So, but
And
again,
guaranteed somewhere in that book there
yeah,
is a typo because every book has them because they always get past the editors no matter how many editors you have. And it doesn't mean that m- it just means that it might not be the right word, but
yeah,
it's not misspelled in the aspect that the proofreading programs are going to underline it with a nice convenient little red line because you just used a different word.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, it's
yeah,
and I find them in It doesn't matter who's published them or how famous they are.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
that's
I'm still kind of in the honeymoon phase and just
that is awesome.
allowing, yeah, just allowing myself to really, really appreciate this and getting
Mhm.
this out into the world.
Most definitely. And it's such a great accomplishment to get it to the final stage where you go, okay, print.
Yes,
And then
yes.
get it out there. Are you doing any other events prior to our June event?
Yes, I have, let me grab my calendar. Um, Next weekend, so April 26th, I'm doing
Mhm.
a reading and a signing at my hometown library, which is
Awesome.
exciting because, you know, it's set in my hometown.
Yeah.
And I've told people like you if you grew up in Hillsdale, if you live there, you're going to recognize not only characters, not specific people, because all the names are changed and it is heavily, heavily, heavily fictionized. But
Mhm.
every hometown has characters.
Mhm.
You're going to recognize the guy with the bibs and the what would they the train hats. I can't remember.
Oh, the
Do you
engineer's cap.
remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, the engineer's cap
Yep.
and the bibs and the chaw in his mouth, and
Mhm.
you're going to recognize the fairgrounds and the auction barn and the coffee shop and all that kind of stuff. So doing that, like my first real book event is going to be at my hometown library,
That's
and
awesome.
so that's going to be fun. And then I'm doing a signing in Frankenmuth in May
Mm. Where at?
at Charlene's Book Nook.
Yep. Great place to
Yeah,
have a book signing at. Yep.
yeah, they seem really great.
Yes,
And
they are.
then Traverse City on June
Ooh.
7th. Um, and possibly something in Sandusky, Michigan, not Sandusky, Ohio.
Mhm.
Possibly. And then the end of June
Didn't know
with,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've got a great start to your book signings. The best thing is always starting out in your hometown like that. It's always so much fun, especially when your book takes place there.
yeah,
That is just cool.
yeah.
Um, I can't wait to meet you in person at the end of June and get a copy of the book because now I need to read the book.
Yes, you have
Everybody needs to
exactly
bring that
what
out.
you
So we'll be there with 55 authors, somewhere around 300 book titles. I'm getting official numbers in because those change so often. Some authors are bringing more books, some are bringing less. So somewhere around, right around that number. So we've got a lot going on. So people are going to need to bring a wagon for all their books.
yes, yes.
Well, thank you for joining me today, taking a part out of your day to join me.
I'm always happy to talk about my book, as you can tell.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, and I will see you in June.
Thank you. See you then.